waters are fast-moving.
Unlike other big rallies,
Bit earlier at about 7 a.m. A group from the Coast Guard.
Welcome to #PHVote 2013. Today on Rappler.
That reflects the gaps that we have, income gaps, wealth gaps, geographical gaps, infrastructure gaps. We have all those issues that are in front of us.
The World Economic Forum comes to a close. Industry leaders say the biggest challenge for ASEAN is inclusiveness.
What is critical and what has been lacking for so long a time is credibility.
Budget Secretary Butch Abad says the pork barrel scandal shows government is transparent and accountable. And Thailand's military bans Yingluck Shinawatra from leaving the country without permission. Hello, I'm Maria Ressa. Welcome to Rappler, your social news network. The World Economic Forum on East Asia ends Friday. After a series of discussions on the state of East Asia, the forum's main organizers share their insights from the sessions. World Wildlife Fund President Yolanda Cacabatce says there's a need to involve the youth who are more in tune with a rapidly evolving world.
Important one, I think, is recognizing that the problems today are completely different than the ones last week. We do need to be permanently renovating our way of thinking, looking into new options, new technologies.
Lawson Japan Chairman Takeshi Ninami says the region must deal with poverty and move towards a fairer distribution of wealth, leading to an emerging middle class.
I believe this emerging middle class will play a key role to lead this region to be sustainable in terms of economic growth.
Lippo Group CEO James Riadi says inclusiveness is one of the biggest, most challenging issues of ASEAN.
That reflects the gaps that we have, income gaps, wealth gaps, geographical gaps, infrastructure gaps. We have all those issues that are in front of us. At the same time, if you look at the sectoral, agriculture is huge in ASEAN. And yet in this area, you do not have the inclusiveness.
World Economic Forum Southeast Asia head Sushant Palakurthi Rao says this year's forum emphasizes the power of staying connected. He adds networks are crucial to progress.
The East Asian meeting reflected the many connections we have, but also the many connections we need to create stronger communities of purpose, to ensure that there is economic growth with a purpose for a future of equitable progress. As they say in the Philippines, they don't only say that it's more fun in the Philippines, they also say, Walang mahirap na gawa pag dinan sa tiyaga.
Security remains an issue. With an aggressive China moving in, sending ships and deploying an oil rig to disputed areas, international powers call for a peaceful resolution of maritime disputes. U.S. Pacific Commander Samuel Locklear says it's important to commit to following the rule of law to solve disputes.
You will never stop having friction in this part of the world because a good economic growth, a good competition is good for the region. And that springs competition, it springs friction.
New America Foundation Singapore Senior Fellow Parag Khanna says economic development in the region ramped up tensions over disputed territories.
We didn't have these disputes decades ago because the economies weren't growing as much. There wasn't the need to harness those raw materials as urgently as now.
The Philippines, a vocal critic of China's aggressiveness, urges ASEAN to push for a legally binding code of conduct that will help ensure peace and stability in the region. Philippine Foreign Affairs Undersecretary Laura Del Rosario says delaying negotiations on the code may mean changing environments and parameters.
I mean, we're not acting fast enough, and there's so many changes happening now. So eventually, when we discuss the COC, as we call it, from what point are we going to discuss it? Because when we started talking about it, the changes now were not yet there.
The United States also pledged its support for peace and stability and denied the U.S. pivot to Asia is a reaction to China.
The U.S. position out here is not to contain China. Militarily, we welcome them in. We welcome more transparency. We welcome more exercises. The only person that can contain China is China.
The Philippines and Indonesia sign a historic deal that draws a boundary between the two countries' overlapping exclusive economic zones, or EEZs. It took 20 years of negotiations to set this boundary between the Mindanao Sea and the Celebes Sea. The Philippines Foreign Affairs Department says the deal will help guide fishermen and the two countries' Coast Guard and law enforcement authorities. This is the Philippines' first maritime boundary treaty. Philippine President Benigno Aquino and Indonesian President Susilo Bambang Yudhoyono witnessed the signing of the deal in Manila.
Is a milestone agreement that is founded on the principles of international law, particularly the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. It serves as solid proof to our steadfast commitment to uphold the rule of law and pursue the peaceful and equitable settlement of maritime concerns.
Speaking in Bahasa Indonesia, President Yudhoyono says setting maritime boundaries will allow the two countries to cooperate better. He also says the deal is a, quote, a good example that any border disputes, including maritime border tension, can be resolved peacefully. Indonesian Foreign Minister Marty Natalegawa says ASEAN is an organization that can unite without the threat of another country. He says the maritime deal between the Philippines and Indonesia show the region there's another way.
It's not a given that we are always in a state of a vicious cycle of tensions and mistrust, and Indonesia and the Philippines working hand in hand, I think, can be part of that game-changing, momentum-building situation.
Natalegawa says the South China Sea conflict is a litmus test for ASEAN. He adds it's not about taking sides, but delivering what he calls its centrality role. China claims most of the islands in the South China Sea, overlapping claims by the Philippines, Vietnam, Malaysia, and Brunei.
Well, we have to first of all recognize that there is no military solution to this issue. Security is common goods. It must be enjoyed by all. It cannot be at the expense of the other. That is why we have to promote peaceful settlement of disputes.
He also says China's power is not a threat, but he adds China must abide by ASEAN's Code of Conduct on the South China Sea.
We see China's rise as being an opportunity, not necessarily as a challenge. So China is a very strong, important partner to ASEAN, but it must actually deliver on the commitments, on the declaration of conduct that we have all signed on board on.
Indonesia's coordinating minister for the economy, Khairul Tanjung, says Indonesia is set to benefit from ASEAN integration. He adds ASEAN's 6 first member nations have already taken down most tariff controls and is already a free trade market. According to his estimate, Indonesia controls almost 40% of the ASEAN economy. Asked who will be the winners and losers in the upcoming integration, he says ASEAN is, in his words, a sharing and caring organization, and the community of nations should mitigate the negatives.
So we doesn't want to make it somebody got the benefit so much, somebody is lost so much. So somebody who got the benefit so much have to be caring and sharing to the somebody who's lost. So that is the principle of ASEAN.
Industry leaders ask, is it time to recalibrate existing gauges like the GDP, the Gross Domestic Product, and the Millennium Development Goals for economic growth? Nestle's Nandu Nankishore says the world needs to move beyond GDP as measure.
The only way we can sustainably create value for our shareholders is if we simultaneously create value for the society in which we operate.
Indonesia's Sintesa Group CEO Shinta Wijaya Kamdani says the Millennium Development Goals, or the MDG, are a stepping stone to sustainability. She says Indonesia has reduced its poverty level in 2.
Indonesia is perhaps one of the countries that is still far behind. But what we're trying to is now having an alignment between the different component of stakeholders.
International Monetary Fund's Naoki Shinohara stresses the importance of a carefully designed program for the equitable sharing of prosperity.
redistribution of income can have positive contribution to growth if the design is right. I think that is the conclusion.
During the discussions on strategic infrastructure across ASEAN, investors agree that public-private partnerships, PPP, are ideal to accelerate construction. Vina Capital Group's Don Lam lauds the efficiency of privatization.
For one of the things that Vietnam do a lot of now is just privatize the infrastructure asset. So that's the quickest way for the government to get the money in and then use that money for the new infrastructure project.
Asian Development Bank Stephen Groff brings up the issue of distinguishing between authentic needs and vested interest in infrastructure development.
We all too often, in this region, in the world, we see vested interest masquerading as national interest. And we need to do much better at distinguishing between those two things.
Shipping magnate Enrique Razon Jr. says vested interest masquerading as national interest happens all over the globe. He adds governments take a long time to get programs off the ground, but once momentum kicks in, it moves at a good pace.
Almost nearly a golden age for financing, especially for governments. And our government in particular is investment grade. Cost of funding is very cheap at the moment, and we can do it. And we just have to be patient.
In an interactive session at the forum, a top Philippine church official joins cabinet secretary, civic society, and youth leaders from around the world to define the future of civic engagement and determine the steps to get there. Sectoral leaders focus on technology, the youth, women, among other things, and say institutions need to adapt. Manila Archbishop Luis Antonio Cardinal Tagle says education is important to help people become more involved in society. He adds, there's a desire that we should enhance civic responsibility, but for civic engagement to be sustained, people should be trained in their responsibility to society. Will corruption scandals like the multi-billion peso pork barrel scam scare investors? Put on the spot about the government's anti-corruption drive, Budget Secretary Butch Abad says the scandal can be seen in a positive light, showing this administration is transparent and is accountable.
What is critical and what has been lacking for so long a time is credibility. People are looking at is this government serious? Is it going to be consistent? Are we really reaching a regime of predictability and stability here? That's why they held off for some time. Yes. They were not coming in for some time. But now, when they're seeing that, not just leadership, but policies, processes, and institutions are actually moving in that direction, now they're seeing because. A credit rating upgrade is not just a financial and economic assessment.
Yes.
It's a social as well as a political assessment
yes.
of the country's ability to fulfill its commitment.
With an overhauled disbursement system replacing the Priority Development Assistance Fund, Abad says legislators have to work with the executive to meet both the country's needs and those of their constituents. The alleged mastermind of the latest corruption scandal, Janet Lim Napoles, will remain in the hospital. A Makati Regional Trial Court suspended its earlier decision ordering her to return to her detention cell in Laguna by Friday. On Wednesday, doctors recalled its discharge order after noting Napoles' quote, excessive vaginal bleeding. Doctors have 3 days to submit a progress report on Napoles' condition. Thailand's military bans ousted Prime Minister Yingluck Shinawatra and at least 154 other prominent figures from leaving Thailand without permission. The military also summoned Shinawatra and several others to report to the military junta 1 day after declaring a coup and imposing a nationwide curfew. This comes just days after the army declared martial law. Military Chief General Prayut Chan-o-cho censors media and suspends most of the Constitution, drawing criticism from Washington, Europe, and the United Nations, who all call for civilian control to be restored. Thailand has been locked in a nearly decade-long political crisis since a military coup unseated Yingluck's older brother Thaksin in 2006. This is the 12th successful military coup Thailand has had since 1932. Let's now look at Rappler's Wrap for today, a list of the 10 most important events around the world you shouldn't miss. At number 7, China and Russia veto a draft resolution by the United Nations Security Council that would refer Syria to the International Criminal Court for crimes committed in a 3-year civil war. It's the 4th time China and Russia blocked Western resolutions. This paralyzes the efforts of the Security Council to end a war estimated to have killed more than 160,000 people. British Ambassador Mark Leal Grant calls the two countries' move disgraceful. At number 8, the Russian Foreign Ministry demands an official explanation from British authorities after Prince Charles reportedly compared Russian President Vladimir Putin's actions in the Ukraine to those of Hitler. Russian Foreign Ministry spokesman Alexander Lukashevich says if these words were really said, then undoubtedly they are not worthy of a future British monarch. And at number 10, 2 Filipinas impressed judges during the blind auditions of The Voice Australia. Feli Irvine, a Filipino-Scot based in Sydney, got judges Ricky Martin and Joel Madden to turn their chairs when they heard her rendition of Rihanna's We Found Love. Irvine joins another Filipino, Joanna Aguila, who sang You've Got the Love by Florence and the Machine. For the full top 10, visit Rappler.com's The Wrap. Every story on Rappler has a mood meter, which gives you 8 emotions to choose from. Click how you feel and your vote comes down to the mood navigator in the middle of the front page. That crowdsources the mood of the day. It also gives you the top 10 stories that have affected our readers and our viewers the most emotionally. If you take a look, these 10 stories have gotten the most number of votes on their mood meter. The stories today, we have Philippines-Indonesia seal a historic maritime deal. You have 11% inspired, 75% happy, interestingly 4% sad. Let's pick up that gray. Thai Army declares a coup, and that is 44% sad. That gray bringing out the story, the color of the story with the most number of votes. What they don't tell you about the OFW life. This is written by Rappler's columnist Shakira Sison. A representative voice of 10 million overseas Filipino workers, 73% sad. That gray bringing out the mood of the day. Today, most people are sad. Well, that is Rappler's newscast for today, Friday, May 23, 2014. Visit Rappler.com and watch our newscast Monday to Friday. Tell us how you feel on our mood meter and help us crowdsource the mood of the day. I'm Maria Ressa. As we say at Rappler, tomorrow begins today.